It's our last month episode. What to focus on in the final month of the season. How to allocate fab down the stretch. When to drop injured players. And a look at some strategies for 2024 drafts in terms of risk. Baseball HQ Radio's Patrick Davitt joins us next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and as always, with me, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Got back from vacation. We had a nice week-long summer vacation for the family. It's always nice. Wrapped up the regular season of a couple of my leagues. First place in one, second place in the other. Going into the playoffs, first round buys in each. Pretty good. How's your summer vacation going, Ruvain?
It went great. We actually went to Rochester. We saw a AAA game, the Yankees, the Rail Riders against the Red Wings of Rochester, and we got to see a couple of players who actually got called up later that night. Jason Dominguez and Austin Wells were both called up that night after I saw them play in an actual game, which was really cool.
There you go. And the entire Los Angeles Angels were put on waivers, apparently, the other day. You hear that? That was crazy.
Yes, I think they're called the Guardian Angels now because they're in Cleveland. I think it's the running joke, but yeah, I don't remember a fab like this before where this happens where players just get picked off of waivers like this. This many players, I just don't remember it.
I think we should hand out fab dollars to all the teams and have the teams use them during the season. You're out of fab, players coming off waivers, you can't get them. No.
And the Marlins can't have $1 bids either, or $0 bids.
No $0
better that way.
bids allowed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been a couple of weeks, but welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We got a great show tonight. We've got Patrick Davitt from Baseball HQ Radio. What's going on, Patrick?
Hello. How are you, Ariel?
I'm doing fantastic. And how's your summer going?
So far, so good. It's been a bit dodgy on the weather up here in Canada because of the smoke from all those fires and what have you. And it's been raining pretty heavily, but it's going to be real nice next week. Could be even heading off to the pool in September, which is relatively rare. And I'm pretty happy about the Angels dump situation because I've got Hunter Renfroe on my tout team, and I think in Cincinnati he could be a little more of a threat to hit some home runs and drive in some runs.
You've got Renfroe on the NL tout team?
No, on the American League tout team.
Oh, the American League tout. Oh, that's right. They continue to play on the NL. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it's a good deal.
Yeah. No, hopefully that helps you and helps everybody else who it does. I've got Randall Grichuk on a bunch of teams. Is it clear where he's heading yet?
I thought he was going to Cincinnati also.
No, Harrison Bader went to Cincinnati. Grichuk was
the
only one
right.
that wasn't picked up. He was the only one that was not picked up.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's see what happens there. So we're going to do a strategy section. It's our last month episode, and not the last month of this podcast, but what do you do in the last month of the baseball season? And a couple of questions and strategy topics to pique your imagination about what to do in the final month of the season. So let's start it off, Patrick, and let's talk about categories, rotisserie categories in particular. What categories do you find can more easily move in the final month of the season where you can gain ground or lose ground?
Well, of course, you can really only lose ground, I think, in the ratio categories. At least that's the way I think of it. But when it comes to the categories in general, in my experience, I've found that it really varies from year to year on the tightness of the categories. And I can give you an example. In the Tout American League Only Auction League this year, I'm just sitting third, a half a point out of second. But when I look at the categories, I'm pretty much locked in homers and RBIs, but I've got a lot of opportunity to gain in stolen bases, on-base percentage, ERA, WHIP. So that's just this year, because in previous years I can remember home runs being right down to the wire, or pitcher wins. is almost always usually pretty tight, but that doesn't necessarily mean an individual team can take advantage of that because it depends on where you are in the big clump. Sometimes you're ahead of the big clump, sometimes you're behind it, sometimes you're on top of it, and all you can do is lose. Sometimes you're on the bottom, all you can do is gain. The thing you have to do, I think, Ariel, is to look at each category and be really realistic about your chances of making gains in it. And to my way of thinking, that means getting out those ATC projections and projecting all the teams in the rest of the way for all of your league, and see how the categories project to shape up, rather than looking at them today, because so much can happen between now and then. You want to really have an idea. I'm 10 RBIs short of catching a point in RBIs. That means I should do that. Well, that's how it is now. But by the end of the season, gosh, you could be 18 RBIs down, and now it's a much more difficult task to accomplish. So that's my advice as far as looking at the categories: is project your league as accurately as you can and make your calculations and make your strategies based on where you project to be, not where you are today.
Yeah, obviously it really is going to be league specific. You're going to have, depending upon what league you're in, you might have tighter categories and not. Obviously, I left this is a very general question. And you did mention the ATC projections, just to let everybody know that those update nightly on Fangraphs for playing time. ATC rest of season projections use Fangraphs playing time. The rates were updated right after I left for vacation, and I'll do one final update right after Labor Day. It'll take you the rest of the season, and the playing time will update nightly. So, Ruvain, what about you? And again, this is a general question, and of course, you have to look at your own specific league. And as Patrick said, yes, project where you're going to be and see what is tight. But for you, which categories are you most concerned about on the whole in general?
I think it's the opposite of what Patrick said. I think the ratio categories are what you have to look for. In the last 2 weeks in the GDD league, I've gained 7 points in ERA and WHIP, and I've lost 3 points in batting average. So I think you have to be very careful what you do with these ratios. You can't bomb them. If you need wins, don't just take any 2-star pitcher and throw them out there, because you can still lose ratio in the ERA and WHIP. Same thing when it goes for saves. If you're getting an iffy guy for saves and he has a blow up, he can not get you the save and hurt you the ERA and WHIP. Same with batting average. I think you still have to look for the hot players on the waiver wire and have them on your bench just in case you need a batting average guy toward the end, because those batting average numbers, those tend to fluctuate a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and you can gain a point here and point there, and that can be the difference if you can't gain on home runs or RBIs or other stat categories like that.
Yeah, I'd say that the ratio categories, and I think, Patrick, you had Paul Sporer on your show last week, and he mentioned this as well, that ERA can come back to you, whereas all the counting categories are counting upwards. If you've got a 30-point lead, you're not losing 30 homers, right? But you can lose ERA, or somebody else can lose ERA and back into you. So ERA and WHIP can actually fluctuate quite a bit. Batting average too. I'll also add that anything with low quantities, stolen bases, wins, saves, they have low quantity. They're in the high, double digits, low hundreds. Those are going to be more tight in general. RBIs and runs, unless your own league has a ridiculous clump, they're more spread out. We're talking numbers in the 900, 700s, 900s, 1,000, depending upon the number of teams you're in. I'll go with that. In terms of FAB, let's talk generally about what to do. What is your general idea of how you manage FAB in the final month, Patrick?
Well, at this stage of the season, I'm willing to be pretty aggressive with what little money I have left, because I'm pretty aggressive all year, sometimes to a fault. I spent 99 units out of 1,000 this week. I had about 170 left, because in tout you can claim back some FAB money if you lose a player to injury that you drafted. But I spent 99 on our oldest Chapman because I'm pretty close in picking up 3 points in saves, and I believe that he's now at the head of the line in the Texas bullpen. So I thought that was a pretty good investment when you tie in the possibility of making a move in a particular category. And I don't think his ratios are going to kill me too badly, and he may even pick up some strikeouts, which could help me pick up a point over the reliever that he's replacing. So I like the possibility of getting some traction from Aroldis Chapman. I also put in a fairly substantial bid on J.P. Martinez in Texas because the scuttlebutt when he got called up was that he was a stolen base potential guy. He had 28 or 30, I think, in AAA before his call up, and I could really use those bags. And I noticed the other night that he was being used as a pinch runner, which might be the best of all possible worlds because batting average wise, there is a threat there, as you guys just finished saying. So, really, the best thing he could be for me is a pinch hitter who could maybe get me the odd counting stat, but more importantly, a pinch runner who could pick me up some stolen bases.
So, Ruvain, how much does it depend in terms of your usage of Fab over the last month, in terms of how you've been doing over the season? Obviously, if you're in dire need, you're going to have to spend more earlier, but how much in general do you find yourself pacing no matter what, and how much do you find yourself saying, hey, it's really the situation that I'm in?
I think it's the situation that you're in, but I think you could split up the fab almost equally the last 4 weeks of the season. If you want to do 3 weeks and just have a couple extra bucks left over, that's fine. But usually you want to try to even it out. But I think it also depends on how much fab the players around you in the standings have, and you have to look at that. That's very important too. You have to know exactly how much money in Fab a team that you're bidding against can bid. So if you and realize how many weeks are left in the season, and just think about it and try to do the quick math in your head. If they have 20 out of 100 a budget of $1,000, if they have $50 left and you have $75 left, you can be a little bit more aggressive. But if you have, let's say, $25 left and they have $50 left, you have to be a little bit not as aggressive unless you really want that one player, because otherwise you're going to get outbid no matter what. So I think it really depends on where you are, and also take a look at the last couple of weeks. People have been bidding a little bit lower numbers. You don't see any big numbers out there. Take a look at what everyone's going for recently and see that high number and try to figure out if you can get to that number or go someplace near it to get the player that you want. Otherwise, you're going to be putting in bids and you're not going to get anything.
Yeah, your point about monitoring others is important, and I think that gets lost in the shuffle, but the economic term is purchasing power. When you have bid a lot already and the others all have more than you, then your purchasing power towards the end is very low. But if everybody was purchasing a lot and you still have $400 out of 1,000, your purchasing power is so great that you're going to run everything, but you've already not gotten enough the rest of the season. The idea is you want to, in general, look at what the spend of the league is doing throughout the season. And I'm not saying you have to be exactly in the middle, but you want to gauge yourself that you're not overly high or overly low. I've spoken about this topic when we talk about an auction. When you do an auction, throughout the auction, you want to somehow be somewhere in the middle, in the pack, that you're able to bid on players throughout, that you're able to bid on early players and late players. And I think the same is true. You want to be able to bid on players in April and May and in June and July and in August and September. So you want to be able to have a similar purchasing power throughout. Just keep tabs on where you are and, slow down or speed up as you go. In general, though, I just put a number on it. I like to have about 10 to 12% of the budget in $1,000 leagues, and maybe a little bit more, 12 to 15% for $100 leagues. That's where you have a $1 minimum. When you have zero minimum leagues, I think you can be closer in the last month to like 5-10% total, because you can save. You always have the zero bid in terms of just getting a player, just anybody to play, and then you want to have 5 to 10% to bid over somebody else. Does that jive with you, Patrick?
It does, and something else that Ruvain said I thought was really worth noting and thinking about is when you're in the last month of a league, there's only 4 weeks left for anybody you sign this week to impact your standings. And next week, there'll only be 3 weeks left for them to impact it. So I can see an approach where if you had $100 left at the start of September, you might want to scale it out, 55 or 50, 25, 15, 10 for the last 4 weeks because of the extra impact you're going to get for the fourth week in that first week of the month. And as I said, when it's this close to the end, there's no point in saving up for that last week because the last week is probably going to be too late to have much of an effect on your standings positions anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That obviously, if you're getting triple the production or the triple the effect, you do want to have more fab. So the right now the dollars should be a little bit more than the ones in the final week. I will say, however, I do like to have the hammer. I want to have the hammer in the last week because you never know what category can come up. Like, for example, 2 years ago, I lost to Ron Chandler in labor, and it's because I only had $1 left of fab, whereas Ron had 2 or 3. And since he had the hammer, he picked up Harrison Bader. And last week he stole 3 bases. That propelled him up 2 points, knocked me down 1, and he won by 3. Right? So having the hammer is important, but yes, the scaling is important. And of course, that's true for the whole season. I like to spend 600, 650 of my fab in the first half and have 300, to 400, let's say, for the second half, because obviously the bigger impact, you want a player impacting you the whole season is worth more than just a half a season.
Well, what's a worse miscalculation, having leftover fab, or if it's an auction, having leftover money at the auction? What do you think about that?
Oh, I'd way rather have leftover fab because in a lot of instances, leftover fab means you had a pretty lucky season as far as not having to replace guys, and there was really not much reason for you to spend aggressively, especially early on. But at the auction, boy, I just never want to have maybe $1 at the end if I'm unlucky, but I'd really like to spend every last dollar I have in the auction because that's where the whole foundation of your team is. Ariel, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, $1 in the auction is worth how many dollars of fab? Is worth what? $25 of fab out of 100, 25%. Right? Each dollar of the auction is so much more precious, and it's earlier on. So the answer is clearly the auction violation. Fab is a correction. Things come up.
Right.
There's injuries during the season. If you got lucky, then you didn't have to spend more fab. Right? You're looking to spend with the market.
Yep. Exactly so.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about lineups. In general, Patrick, should you be churning your roster a lot more in the final month of the season?
Again, I think it depends on your situation. If you're lucky, you won't have to churn at all because your team will be firing on all cylinders and it won't really matter. Now, I can see if you think there's something to be gained by streaming pitchers or hitters, because you think you can gain even a single strikeout or a home run or something by doing so, and the categories are tight enough where that's going to pay off, then by all means it's something that you should do. But I don't necessarily think that you want to be any more aggressive. I certainly don't think you want to be churning for the sake of churning. I think if you're going to churn your roster heavily, you should have a reason for doing it, that if somebody else came up to you and said, "Why are you churning so heavily?" you'd be able to say, "Because of A, B, and C," and then they would go, "Oh, I see." But if they asked you that and you could only say, "I listened to Ariel Cohen on a Beat the Shift podcast and he said to do it, so I'm going to do it," that's not a good reason to do anything. You should be able to express to yourself and others why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it really is depending upon what your team situation is. If you have tons and tons and tons of saves and, you've got a big buffer, then you might want to churn your entire bullpen out of here. Or vice versa. You might want to churn your starters around if you got too many wins. Or if you've got a 25 stolen base lead, just chug them. I mean, just to give you an example, Ruven and I are in doing an NFBC auction. Depending upon the day, we're in second and third. We've got a humongous lead in batting average. I mean, we've got a fantastic team. We've got let's say almost a 280 batting average, and the next best team has like a 265. We have Luis Arias. Even though Luis Arias is obviously a player that will play well above replacement in a 15-team league, I'm considering dropping him. I mean, he doesn't steal. He doesn't have homers. A couple of runs, but no RBIs. If we don't really need the batting average, Luis Arias is worth like 0. So why would we even play him? We're not playing him anymore. Why would we even have him on our roster? You might see us churning that a little bit, provided we think that the teams that will pick him up aren't the ones that actually can pass us in the standings and batting average. We want to help somebody else, but churning for what you need category specific, go ahead. There's no rule that says you got to keep good players. Obviously, the player is going to help you in 5 categories, sure, but they're only helping you 2 categories and you don't need them. churn away in the final month. Absolutely.
I think that's really a sound advice. We hang on to our players for the wrong reasons a lot of times, and sometimes it's because we had them as keepers and we really like them, or sometimes it's because we spent quite a bit of money at the auction and we say, I can't throw Arias away. Look, he cost me $22 at the auction. Doesn't matter. He's not helping you now, then he has no place on your roster. And I'll give you an example. It wasn't a churn, it was a trade. But many years ago, I was in a league that had Mariano Rivera on my roster, and his contract was expiring. And I had a big lead in saves, just like you suggested. And I traded Rivera to another guy in the league for nothing. I got back $1 a fab, or just nothing. And all the guys were saying, "Why did you do that?" I said, "Well, the team to whom I traded Mariano Rivera is going to go by 3 teams that are chasing me in the overall. So I'm gaining 3 points indirectly by putting Rivera on that other roster where he can do some harm to my opponents and thereby help me." So those assets that you have in your roster can help you in indirect ways as well as just by the stats they're putting down on your tally sheet.
But I also think you have to consider where you are in the month of September. Let's say you're 2 weeks into September, and there's only 2 weeks left in the season. Think about who you're dropping it. Let's say you drop a Luis Arias, and someone needs to gain batting average points. They're only going to be able to have him for 1 week, a week and a half, maybe. Is he going to play the last week of the season? You don't even know these things. So, if you're going to churn, make sure to be smart about who you drop and when you drop him. If you have a starting pitcher and he's you don't trust him, or you think he's going to be shut down, and you can get maybe 1 or 2 starts left, and you could drop him. Like for instance, I have Dakota Hudson on a lot of different teams. Next week he's playing the Braves. If I drop him this week, is someone else going to get from him? They're not going to get this start this week, and you may get a start in the following week, or maybe 2 starts the following week after that. Is it worth it to drop him and churn and get a different starting pitcher in that spot? I think that's maybe the proper thing to do when you churn.
Yeah, let me ask you, Reuven, an injury question. There's going to be a bunch of injuries for players who, they're out, for the next couple of days. It looks like they're sore, blah, blah, blah. Or they're doing a rehab start. I don't know. What is your general rule, or what is the right advice to give people in terms of rostering injured players the final month of the season? What is the bar for you in terms of when to drop them or when to be at all interested in retaining a player like that?
Well, first of all, you have to think about if they're injured now, when they're going to come back, and how much you're going to get out of them. Just like I said before, if you're not going to get that much out of them in the last week or 2 in the season, like let's say you have a starting pitcher, let's say you picked up Joe Musgrove, you got him off the waiver wire last week. What are you going to get out of him next week? What are you going to get out of the week after? What are you going to get out of the week after? Probably not that much. So for someone who has him, it's almost like a wasted roster spot that you can have someone else for. But I also think it really depends on the type of injuries. It depends if it's a hitter or a pitcher. If it's a pitcher and they have an elbow issue, or even like let's say Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman has a rib injury. He just started playing catch this week. Do you think you're going to get more than 3 starts out of him the rest of the year? He still has to build up. He still has to rehab. And plus, the minor league season ends I know the AAA minor league season ends a week before the season ends. So he's not going to have any place to even rehab. So they're going to just put him in. And how long is he going to go for? So you have to really think about these questions when it comes to it. Also, for hitters or pitchers, whatever it may be, if you hear the word oblique or you hear the quad or anything like that, grade 1 is 2 to 4 weeks. Grade 2 is 4 weeks and beyond, usually 6 weeks. So if you hear those terms, grade 1, you can hold on to them because there's a chance they can come back, but they still may need rehab. If it's a grade 2, there's no reason to keep them. They can be dropped.
Yeah, I have a quick rule called the 50% rule in September. If you aren't going to get, or if you're not certain enough that you're going to get 50% of the playing time or 50% of the regular production that you're going to get from your player, you really don't need to hold a person, right? If there's 3 weeks left and they're out for the next week, you can't guarantee exactly when they can come back. There's really almost no purpose to holding them. You need production. You can't get zeros. You can't get. It's not about upside. It's not about, well, but this guy is Mike Trout. He'll give me. Now you need to bank on something. Remember, a guy who shows half the production of Mike Trout, like if Mike Trout is gonna have 40 homers and let's do Acuna even, 50, 40 homers and 50 steals, right? Half the production, 25 or so, We're talking half the price, right? So if you have a $10 guy, a $5 guy, if you take half of that price, you're teetering on a waiver guy. There's absolutely no need to get a guy, to keep a guy who's going to give you less than 50% of production guaranteed. You just need to bank stats.
I agree with that, and the reason is because many years ago, somebody very smart in this game said to me while we were sitting around at First Pitch Arizona, actually, they said, what people need to understand, it's not the player who creates the stats, it's the slot. It's the roster slot that's creating the value. And so you have to make optimum use of the slot and only then start thinking about which player is going to do that for you given all the circumstances surrounding the player, the injury, the amount of time left, and all the other things that you guys say. Don't think of it as this is Mike Trout. Think of it as this is my outfield one slot, and if Mike Trout's not available for it, I've got to get, as Ariel just said, I have to get production from the slot. Keep the slot in mind, not just the player.
And using Mike Trout as an example is perfect. He's got a wrist injury. He's still recovering from the fracture and the surgery and everything like that. So he's still recovering. He's not active right now. He is not swinging a bat. He came back. He had pain. Is he going to get you any stats this week? Is he going to get you any stats next week? Is he going to rehab? Are the Angels going to shut him down? There's so many question marks about him. You'll probably get more value on the waiver wire for a fill-in than you will for Mike Trout the rest of the season.
Yeah, agree. Back to you, Ruvain, on a couple of specific pitchers. Joe Musgrove, Kyle Wright. Kyle Wright is doing some rehab. So is Joe Musgrove. Maybe they come and they pitch the last 2 games of the season. Now, Kyle Wright, maybe it's a ramp up for the playoffs, right? He could be, doing for that. And obviously the Braves are going to be in the thick of the playoffs. The playoffs don't matter for fantasy. Are those 2 pitchers that you should say, you know what? They're really good pitchers. I'm going to keep them, even if it's 1 week. Is that at all worth taking a stash on?
Kyle Wright, maybe, because Kyle Wright, they'll let him build up in a game. You may get a 6 inning if they bring him up. You may get 6 innings out of him. They always have a rotating slot. The Braves do for number 4 and 5 slot. They've been doing that. They may want to rest Charlie Morton down the stretch, so you may get a good start out of him. Plus, he's on a good team. If he goes 6 innings, 5 innings even, you may get a win out of him. Joe Musgrove, what is the push right now for the Padres to push him to go for right now, because the Padres they're done. The Padres aren't making the playoffs. What are they going to push him for? Another example, Felix Bautista. If you have Felix Bautista on your roster, he has some quote unquote damage in his UCL. Is he coming back this year? Is he worth it on your roster right now? What is he doing on your roster? If someone has a UCL injury, they're not coming back 2 weeks later. They're not coming back 3 weeks later. Usually they come back a couple of months later. So he's good enough as done. He's another guy that if he's on your bench, I don't see a reason for it. Now, a guy like Alek Manoah may be a little bit different. He's more of not necessarily an injury, but just trying to get his head on straight and trying to, get himself right. Because the Blue Jays are in it, they can't really use him as they would want to, because they have to have a short leash for him. But I can still see getting some value out of Alek Manoah, but the other ones, I don't think so.
Okay. Any disagreements, Patrick?
No, not at all. I just wanted to remind our listeners that make sure you understand your league rules about when injured players need to be reactivated. If they do, does your league have a separate injured list from a reserve list? All of these kind of things factor into the decisions that you make about rostering. And it's amazing to me when I talk to people who play fantasy baseball, how little they know about their own league rules.
Yeah, always know your league rules. That's obviously the most important thing. And I always tell people, what's teaching people how to use the computer. I said the most important thing is where the power button is.
That's right.
They laugh at that, but it's sort of true, right? You gotta know where you're starting from.
Plus, when you call service, they always tell you turn it off and turn it back on. So you better know where that power switch is.
Yeah, that's right. Patrick, we've been doing a bunch of these with some other guests, and I'm sure we will over the off season. But wanted to get your take while you're on, and heading into the 2024 draft season, we like to look back at what happened in 2023, and especially what you had as draft strategy, and maybe you can tell us a draft strategy that you came into the year with, it worked out, and maybe a draft strategy that you came into the year with and it didn't work out.
A draft strategy that I had that I thought worked out really well was in the Tout Wars auction. And of course, auctions and straight drafts have a lot of differences, which require you to think differently as far as the strategy that you plan to employ. But my strategy going in was to try to, well, not to try to not take any player over $30 and only one player up to $30, and that everything else would be more of a spread the risk kind of approach. And it really worked. And the other aspect of that was I wanted to get two top starting pitchers to anchor my staff, and that half worked because I got Kevin Gosman, but it half didn't work because I got Christian Javier. And my pitching worked out because guys down the list on my starting staff worked out pretty well. I also wanted to avoid spending heavily on closers. That worked out, I have to say, fairly well because the opportunity cost of spending money on a closer is that you can't spend money on 4 or 5 category guys elsewhere, and I think that's really important. And I ended up getting, I'm middle of the pack in saves, and my best reliever saves wise was Clay Holmes of the Yankees, which is no great shakes. But I think I only spent $14 on him or something like that at the draft. So I thought that worked out pretty well. Things I did that didn't work out tended to be focused in my NFBC format leagues. I tried pitching too early this year, and I made up my mind I was going to get a top closer and a top starter in both of those leagues. I got the pitchers I wanted. I got Garrett Cole, I got Edwin Diaz, but I came to realize afterwards that again, I think the opportunity cost is too high. I don't want to be spending a second round pick on a closer who's really a one category contributor at the expense of adding, I don't know, a Manny Machado or something like that, who's going to contribute much more broadly across all the categories. And I think it's easier for top hitters to be that kind of contributor than it can possibly be for a closer. So I wished I hadn't done that, not only because Edwin Diaz got hurt, of course, before the season even started, but even if he had pitched the whole season, I don't know that I would follow the same strategy next year. I suspect I won't.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure if I agree with all of that. I mean, obviously, picking Diaz, I picked him too in a bunch of leagues. Obviously, it's the right strategy. It's the wrong, outcome because, of the injury. I'm a firm believer in that there's a market premium for saves or a market premium for a bunch of, quantities, and saves is just a category that you need to do. Now, in the NFBC is a little bit different. There's also an overall component. You can't win a league by punting. But I found that the better teams have some semblance of saves. Now, the go crazy for it, that never works. But if you have a bunch of closers in the same tier, either top, middle, or so, you need to get somebody in the top or middle, and it's okay to pay a market premium if everybody's paying it. You just want to pay less of a market premium. So going overboard and paying a second, third round value may not have been fine, but if you were uncomfortable in getting closers in the fourth round, you shouldn't be because they're pushed up all the way above that, right?
Yeah, I'd rather get the last guy in the group in the tier that I'm looking at rather than the first. I think that was one of the errors I made. I could have waited until the third round and still got, in that particular draft, Emmanuel Clase went in the third round fairly early, but still in the third round. Hader went in the third round. I just jumped the gun on Edwin Diaz, I think, and the injury notwithstanding, I like I said, I wish I hadn't done it. And another wise man once told me, it might even have been you, Ariel, any strategy works if you get the right players.
Yeah, that's also true. Any response, Ruvain?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm looking back and I thought we did right, and I don't think we really did it right, is still getting a lot of power. I know whenever I'm sitting next to you in the draft table, Ariel, I'm always saying we need more power, 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 power. Our teams are doing well this year, but the area we're lacking in is power, home runs and RBIs. And I don't know, I'm not quite sure. I have to look at it
It's
again.
so funny because we really went for power this year. In a lot of
Exactly.
leagues.
So I'm not sure. We probably just picked the wrong guys. But our pitching did fine. Our overall hitting, the batting average did fine. The stolen base, everything's fine. Except it seems like in every league, I'm chasing home runs and I'm chasing RBIs the entire season. I don't know what it was. I have to look at it and rehash it and see exactly what's going on. But I think also one thing that we did was, and I think we regret it a little bit, is going after guys who we think are going to come back from injury a month into the season or something like that. We had Severino coming off of an injury. I know I had Verlander on a team who's coming into the season with an injury. Any guys coming off an injury, you fall behind and it's hard to catch up on some of those stats. And when they come back, you don't know if they're going to be the player they were before the injury. So I know I always say I want to stay away from the injured people, but sometimes if the bargain's on the table, it's hard not to take that bargain.
Yeah, it's so funny, but, every year, and obviously we're very risk averse, as you might know by now, by listening to this show. Every year, we always, say we're going to avoid risk. And in some leagues, we say, wow, look at that price. We can get Severino. I know but it's a $10 discount. And it more often than not just doesn't work out. If anything that I promise to do more in 2024 is really to say that. And in the NFBC Auction League, Ruvain, the one thing that I just kept repeating over and over again is we're not going for any risk, period. No risk whatsoever. And that league has worked out the best for us. Just sticking to that principle of, I know it's a big bargain, but you can't do it. And that really, what that really tells us, Ruvain, is that the prices that we come up with have to be much more risk discount. It have to be risk adjusted for injury so much more. If you have suspicion of injury, that's got to factor into the price that you're willing to pay. And a bargain, if you have guys who's on your sheet,
or history of injury, even just a history of injury,
history of injury, Tulowitzki and those kinds of guys come in mind. If you have a guy on your sheet that's $15 and he comes up at $9, you're not really getting that $6 bargain because you need to really risk discount him first and put that price back down at 10. And say, you know what, it's just $1 discount. I'm not taking just $1 discount for the risk. The prices have got to be adjusted more of that. I mean, Patrick, do you find any of these risk guys really working out? I mean, Glass now, did he work out? I guess. There's so many more that didn't. Carlos Rodon didn't. DeGrom didn't. Verlander, not really. Severino was a huge bust. Like I can't recall. Wow, some guy got really lucky, and that guy was such an injured player. And wow, you got lucky, you got an injury discount, and it worked. I just can't think of that. And if there's so much more the other way that it just doesn't make sense to even go that route.
Well, my risk guy that I took because I thought I was getting a sufficient discount was Chris Sale of Boston, which I got for, I think, $9 in the tout auction. And I thought at the time we believed that he was going to be back probably within the first 3 weeks or so. He was going to start in April, and I believe he did. I think he started fairly early in April. He started off very poorly, then he started pitching really well. He was piling up strikeouts like crazy. I was leading my league in strikeouts until he got hurt. And then when he got hurt, I realized that I'm not going to get even $10 worth of value out of Chris Sale because of all the time that he's going to miss, then the rehab time, then the struggles he has when he comes back from rehab time, which he has had, by the way, and the risk that we sometimes don't think about with a pitcher, a starting pitcher, is Chris Sale came back and started pitching, but he still hasn't got to 5 innings. So I can't get wins out of Chris Sale, and I can't really get that many strikeouts because he's not going deep enough into games because they're being very cautious with his recovery. He only had 2 rehab starts, I think. And for that reason, and for all those reasons combined, and in accordance with what you said, Ariel, I'm just not going to take those discounts, especially on pitchers, anymore. I mean, if the equivalent of Chris Sale comes up next year and it's $2, then yeah, I'll go. But at $10, I thought he was probably like a $4 or $5 bargain, and that's not enough, as you said. The discount for injury has to be stronger than that, especially for a guy like him who's had Tommy John and all kinds of other injury things. He falls off bicycles, he gets shovels in his foot or whatever the heck it was with all of those things. No thanks. I'm with you. I'm going to say risk is not my friend.
What about this player? What about Aaron Judge? He has a toe injury. He said he's gonna be dealing with it in the offseason. So technically, going to next season, he is a quote unquote injury risk. He's a big guy. He relies on his feet, and he's only really been healthy for maybe one full or two full seasons, and that's it. Is he worth the risk to be taking in the first or second round? Yes, he's still compiling the numbers, but is he compiling the first round numbers that you expect? So, Patrick, do you think he's a guy you're willing to take the risk on? Or I know Byron Buxton's out the window already. Byron Buxton,
Yep.
when he plays 120 games again, then he'll get off the list. But I think a guy like Aaron Judge, who has a foot injury, he said he's going to be dealing with it, and he said he may even need surgery. What do you do with a player like that next year?
And by the way, that's a really good question because we know he's at full strength. He's a first rounder. He's the front of the first round, and it's really just a question of, is the guy healthy? Obviously, we rely on guys like you, Ruvain, to tell us, but that's a great question. Well, yeah, Patrick, what are you going to do with Aaron Judge?
Well, I think step one is if you have to project him at full value. You have to say to yourself, okay, if he plays 150 games, how much value is he going to create? And I think that number is going to be somewhere probably around $50 or $52 worth in 5x5 auction. Then I have to say, how much less than that am I willing to spend because I can't accept the risk that he plays 70 games or 90 games or 40 games. And it's that uncertainty. The thing about those big dollar investments is they really have to pan out. They have to pan out if you're going to be successful in your league in that year. You can't afford to spend $50 on Aaron Judge only to have him play half a season because now you're $25 in the hole before you even start. And it's almost impossible. It's not entirely impossible, but it's very, very difficult to make up a $25 shortfall right out of the gate in that way. So when it comes to Aaron Judge, I think I'll stay on the bidding till the low 20s, and then I'll watch somebody else have him, and good luck to them. And if he plays 150 games, then good for them. But I don't think he's going to, first of all. Another risk that you have to keep in mind is with guys who are injured, they get more days off. The team will give them more days off, especially if they consider themselves to be playoff contenders. They're going to want to say, you know what, we're going to skip this pitcher one start in every 10, like Clayton Kershaw gets skipped. Or if you've got Judge, they might say, oh, we'll DH him once a week and we'll sit him once a week, so he only has to get 425 or 450 plate appearances. And if you're the owner in a fantasy league, you say, no, he's got to get 650 plate appearances because I spent $50 on him in that expectation.
Yeah, I think there's also a distinction that hitter it's very different than the pitcher. That the hitter, if they're missing playing time, they're missing a certain amount, and they can come back. Pitchers are way more iffy and way more binary in terms of, well, he's out for the year, or oh my God, they're crushing your ERAs and WHIP. Like if you had Anthony Rizzo this year and you were playing him for a while and he hit 050 for a while. It's not crippling you. It's bad. It's not crippling you, but it's an offer is different than a bomb for a pitcher, and the length of time missed for pitchers is quite more. As you were talking, and by the way, I as you mentioned, Clayton Kershaw is one of the exceptions, but I don't consider Clayton Kershaw an injured pitcher. I consider him an innings managed pitcher. That whatever it is, he's getting your 115, 120 innings a year, and it's going to be good. So you just have to set your prices for exactly that, and that's it. And one other point, the only pitcher that I think I'd be willing to accept the discount, and it's actually beneficial, is in spring training. You hear a report that, he tweaked something, and it's not even an arm or shoulder related, like a hamstring or whatever. I'm willing to take that discount because that's not a debilitating injury, and that actually gives you a buying opportunity in a draft. But if it's an arm issue, if it's I don't know when he's coming back, the risk discount's got to be enormous for me in order to take it.
And that's what we did with Joe Musgrove. Joe Musgrove had the foot injury, and he was sold at a discount later in the draft season, and you were able to get a good bargain on him. And when he did play, he hasn't played the last couple of weeks, but when you did get him, you got the value that you wanted to get out of him.
But Rizzo's offers, to get back to what Ario was saying, they don't hurt you in the same way that a blow-up catastrophe by a pitcher does. But there is an additional problem with keeping him in your roster is the opportunity cost of the slot not getting
Sure,
any production.
sure,
And I
sure.
think that you always have to keep that in mind. You're keeping Rizzo in there, and he's even if he's not killing your batting average, he's not contributing anything else either. And you have to ask yourself, would I be better off with player X, Y, or Z in the slot because I need the slot to produce some value?
Oh yeah, of course. The Rizzo is killing you, but it's minus $15 worth of value, not minus $30 with a bomb of a pitcher. Is my point. All
Oh
right,
yeah.
great discussion there. Let's get some waiver wire in for this week. And so, who is a player, Patrick, that you might be interested in picking up off the waiver wires for this coming week?
The first guy who interests me is Hunter Goodman of Colorado. He's a call up. He was called up earlier this week. He's nominally a catcher, but I don't think he's going to catch, although he's apparently working really hard on his defense. It's not that good. He's a double A guy, got promoted to triple A in August, and his slash line for the minors across the minors is 259, 338, 586 slugging, 924 OPS with 34 homers. The rest of his game's not so good. He's a big swing and miss guy. He's just got massive power, and when I hear the words massive power and Colorado in the same sentence, of course I'm going to be interested.
Yeah, COL. Those are the three best letters to hear for a hitter. No,
Yeah.
good pick. Ruvain, how about you?
I actually have four different guys because two of them are prospects that are just being called up today. One of them I mentioned already, Jason Dominguez, the Martian. He's 42 already, 42% owned in CBS. I saw him play. When he played, he hit an opposite field double, legged it out with no problem, and early in the game he stole second base. He plays the outfield. He's going to play left field most probably to start with. Oh, actually, he can play center. He's a natural center fielder. And with Harrison Bader gone, he's going to get playing time, and they're going to see what they have with him. Over the course of the AAA season, he only had 9 games at AAA, 3 doubles, 3 stolen bases, and a 419 batting average in AAA. In AA, 15 homers, 37 stolen bases, and a 254 average. He looked good, and he's a guy to look for. Another guy being called up on the Mets here, Brett Beatty. Since he was sent down to the minors, he's batting 298 with 10 homers and 2 stolen bases. I think the Mets want to see what they have with them because they're retooling their whole organization, and they want to see if they actually have a player here. Another guy on the Mets, DJ Stewart. He is just going nuts. He's only 8% on his CBS. In the last couple of weeks, 333 average, 5 homers, 10 RBIs. He's doing everything, and he's batting 4th or 5th in that lineup right now behind the big boppers. So he's an excellent guy. He's an outfield guy. And another outfield guy that I have to mention, that I've always mentioned him, he's one of my favorites, and that's Michael Taylor. He's only 9% owned in CBS. In the last 3 weeks, he's batting 344, 5 homers, a stolen base, 9 RBIs. He was a little even a little dinged up during that time period as well, but he's playing very well, and they're gonna try to play him down the stretch because Minnesota has to try to stay in first place because Cleveland did everything they did to try to get into the playoff match. And with Byron Buxton still out, Michael Taylor's getting the playing time.
Yeah, I was gonna mention a couple of those as well. DJ Stewart, he is so hot in his last 13 games. 8 homers, 15 RBI. That guy is just crazy right now. And you did mention Jason Dominguez, but how about other Mets? I thought you would mention the other Mets prospect being called up, Ronnie Mauricio, batting 292 this year in AAA with 23 homers, 24 stolen bases, 71 RBI in AAA. He looks great. He looked great in spring training. To be honest, maybe the Mets could have used him throughout the season. I think he would have been better served here. That's a guy to look for. I'll give you 2 more. Elvis Andrus. He's a guy for deeper leagues. He's been pretty hot lately. In August, 3 homers, 5 steals, batting 346. He's definitely 15-team relevant. If you need a guy and you just need a little boost of steals, the waiver wire looks barren. But Elvis Andrus can help you with steals, and he's not a 0 in every single category elsewise. He's a guy who's gotten hot in second half of seasons recently. I would really, really look at Elvis Andrus. And how about Trevor May, another former Met here? In this past month, 10 innings pitched, 9 strikeouts, 2.61 ERA, 1.2 whip, 6 saves. If you need saves, I know it's the Oakland Athletics, but May's the guy. He's posting everything. He's really into it. May's been doing great. I would roll with him. I picked him up in a couple leagues, and he's definitely helped us. Anyone else,
15
Patrick?
saves. Yeah, May has 15 saves since June the 1st. So I think he's an interesting guy, but the underlying metrics are not strong. I'll just say that. I do have two more. I thought we were going to go round and round. My second guy is Cavan Biggio in Toronto. Bo Bichette and Matt Chapman are both on the IL, which is really straining the Blue Jays infield situation. And Biggio, he's not. He started his career stronger than he has finished it so far. Let's just say that. But if you prorate what he's done this year, he's on a pace for a 22 homer, 15 stolen base year in 650 plate appearances, and I think they have to play him while those other guys are out. So far, they've been using guys like Ernie Clement and Mason McCoy, and these guys are not the future of the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't think necessarily that Biggio is either, but we're talking about getting playing time down the stretch, and I think they're going to be relying on him because they've played him at second this year, they've played him at short, they've played him at third, they've played him in right. This is a guy who's going to get some plate appearances down the stretch with these injuries. And the other guy I'd like to mention is a reliever also, Danny Coulombe, a left-handed reliever in Baltimore. With the Mountain, Felix Bautista is done for the year, as we've heard. Coulombe's going to step up and be the second in command behind Yennier Cano, the closer. And being a left-hander, he's going to always be in those high-leverage situations, I think. He's got 2 saves this year, 4 vulture wins, and I think that Baltimore team is the kind of team you want to have those 8th-inning guys in because there's lots of chances of come from behind wins and so forth. He has a 2.59 ERA and a 1.06 WHIP this year, and interestingly, he's more effective against right-handers than he is against left-handers, and the reason is his primary pitch is a cut fastball. And you New Yorkers probably remember a relief pitcher who threw a cut fastball who was more effective against opposite-handed hitters.
John
I was
Franco.
thinking of Mariano Rivera.
Mariano.
So
It's true.
it's
By
a
the way,
deep league play.
it's true for John Franco also. He was much better against the righties against the lefties.
Well, Biggio and Coulombe in particular, I think, are deep league kind of ads. I don't think you're going to be interested in 10 or 12 teamers because there's no reason to add a guy like either of them. But in your 15 teamers, your 20 teamers, I think if you've got an open slot, Danny Coulombe will help your ratios or certainly not hurt them. And he might back into a few saves, a few wins. I like guys like this.
And the fact that the Orioles have 2 other lefties in the bullpen, they can use them in high leverage situations. So I like that pick.
Yep.
Yeah, we've stressed the entire season about picking up Yennier Cano, even in 12-team leagues, because he gets those ratios, he gets those strikeouts, the occasional vulture win, the occasional vulture save, and the possibility of if something happened to Bautista, he's in it. And take a look, you're going to get a month of Yennier Cano. So, Ruben and I own him on at least half our teams, at least. So we've got another anointed closer on a very, very good team because we did that. Hey, Cano is going to end up with being very, very valuable this year. All right, let's do a couple
next.
And next, that's right. And next, let's keep rolling with the pitcher preview. Getting to the end of the season, and where you're going to be looking at starters that are going to be good for this week and even for 2 weeks from now. Who's a pitcher, Patrick, or a couple pitchers that you're looking at for this coming week to pick up?
Well, first, I think this might be the greatest 2-start week for a pitcher in history. Atlanta right-hander Spencer Strider starts Tuesday at home to St. Louis, and then he's at home to Pittsburgh. How great is that for a 2-start week? He might get 100 strikeouts. Yeah, I know, he's not available. I just thought it was funny. I also looked at a couple of other guys. What I do in these 2-start situations when I'm looking for anybody who's got some combination of pitching against Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Detroit, or Oakland. And there is somebody who's there's one guy who's got to start at KC and the second at Detroit this week, and it's Chicago White Sox right-hander Jesse Scholtens. And if he gets skipped for any reason this week, his next start would be at home versus Kansas City. So it's pretty good. The problem is that Jesse Scholtens isn't very good as a pitcher. He's 1-6. He's got a 4 ERA and a 1.30 WHIP, 47 strikeouts in 70 innings, and 22 walks. So I don't know how bad. I don't know if I'd pitch this guy against the Little League team from California.
Yeah. It's tough. What do you do with a crappy pitcher who's got great matchups? Ruven, I generally don't want to start crappy pitchers, period, even if it's good matchups. I'll start mediocre pitchers against bad matchups, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, one of the guys that I have here is David Peterson. He's supposed to start one start against Washington against Patrick Corbin. Now, he's only owned 12% in CBS leagues, and he's been pretty decent recently. He has a 3.52 ERA. His whip is not that great, but he's getting you some strikeouts, and he's actually last couple of games he's gone deeper into innings. I actually saw him this past Sunday when he was playing the Angels, and he looked very sharp. He looked very good. He looked like his mechanics were great. And against the Nationals in Washington, I'll take that any day. Another guy on the Mets. It happens to be that all the Mets pitchers a lot of them are available. Jose Quintana. He's only 31% owned. A possible two start. Also at Washington and at Minnesota. Now Quintana's been right now the second best pitcher on the Mets. That's not saying that much, but he's the second best pitcher on the Mets. And he's going deep into games, so he's giving you the opportunity to get wins, and that's very important late in the season. He could probably go pretty deep into the game against Washington, probably against Minnesota also. So I think he's a guy that if he's available, he can go deep in the game, maybe get you a win. And another guy I want to mention, just because he's been doing so well recently, and that's Matt Manning. Yes, he pitches for Detroit, but he pitched today against the Yankees, 6 innings, 2 hits, 4 Ks. Before that, the last 17 and 2/3 innings, he only has 6 strikeouts, but he's got 2 wins, an ERA of .51, and a whip of .68. The Tigers are not going to shut him down. He's only made 14 starts this season. So if he has a good matchup and he's available in your league, he's a guy to look at because he seems like one of the hotter pitchers out there right now.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with pitchers on crappy teams. That's fine. As long as they're hot and as long as they have a good matchup, I'm fine with them. I'll give you a couple guys. Darius Vines on Atlanta, 10% owned. He's an older prospect. He had a good year in the minors, 2.70 ERA, 1.11 WHIP, almost 10 K per nine. He had a very good start against Colorado in his debut. He does pitch for Atlanta, so go 5 innings and you might get a win. He's double 2 start against St. Louis and then Pittsburgh at home. And then next week, he's at Miami for a start. So, this is not for everybody. This is for deeper leagues. But if you're chasing wins and you're okay with the RA and whip, it might be a decent lottery ticket. More than a lottery ticket. It might be a good card to play. Kyle Hendricks, he's still available in tons of leagues. He has a 3.59 ERA on the year with a 1.13 whip. It sounds like Kyle Hendricks to me. Not a lot of strikeouts, but this is what he usually does. I mean, he's a pitcher that I used to rely on. He's 2 start versus San Francisco and Arizona, and then next week at Arizona. That's not bad. 15-team league, he should be picked up. Even 12-team league depends on who you have to play instead, right? But Kyle Hendricks is somebody who's interesting. And how about Patrick Corbin versus the Mets? Corbin does strike out some players. The Mets are not a great team, especially against the lefties. Take a shot. I don't know. It's one of these guys, if you got some ERA that you can lose a little bit and just give it a shot. Again, this is darts at the end of the season. There's nobody to pick up here that, this guy is going to be great for the rest of the season. We're talking about darts just to help you gain a win here, a win there. And that could make the difference for you in terms of catching your championship.
Hey, I have a question for you guys. This week, Seattle is going to be at Cincinnati and at Tampa, which means George Kirby and Bryce Miller are both going to get 2 starts. One against Cincinnati, one against Tampa. They're both pretty high strikeout teams. They strike out a lot against right-handed pitching, and they're not really that good as far as WOBA is concerned, but they score runs, especially Tampa at home. So in most formats, weekly move formats, if you want to start either of them, you have to start them for both starts. What do you guys think about measuring the 2 starts as far as whether you want to do both or do none because you can't just do one?
So, first of all, I think George Kirby is not going to start. I think he's scheduled for Sunday. So that would only give him 1 start. But in general, the question is, if you have a pitcher above a certain line, you just got to roll with him. And,
Right.
if they're going to be pitching 6 innings, a bunch of starts, you're getting chances for wins. Guys who are consistently going deep, especially guy Kirby, he doesn't give up any walks, right? His walk rate is one of the lowest in the history of baseball for the amount of time he's pitched. That's a guy who's going to limit contact. I'm good with no matter what team he pitches against. And you got to roll with 2. Even guys who are in the middle, if you don't roll with them, and our general rule on the show is if you're not going to roll with them in a 2-start week, what the hell are they doing on your roster? Right? There's almost no reason for them to be on your roster if you can't put them in a 2-start week, whoever it is. Right? So that's my general rule: is pretty much play or drop almost.
What about Bryce Miller, who's a rookie?
Well, they're not going to shut him down. I don't think they're going to shut Miller down. And I think if you're going to get all those strikeouts, how many more 2-start weeks are you going to get out of them? Maybe one more. So you got to get those strikeouts now when you can, because you're going to be looking for them
Yeah.
later on the waiver wire. I'd rather get them now when we're playing when they're a hot team. The Mariners are very hot. No matter what, even if they give up 4 or 5 runs, the Mariners are scoring so many runs right now, and they're doing so well that they can even still get a win with that. It's like, I mean, would you rather have him, or would you rather have a quote unquote Rich Hill type guy who may go 5 innings, who may give up 5 runs, who may give up a couple of strikeouts, get a couple of strikeouts, but a less chance for wins? I think if there's a chance for wins and they're going 5 innings, 6 innings, I think you have to, at this point, you have to roll with them.
Yeah, if you have a 2-start week of a pitcher and there's 4 weeks left the season, you're talking about 40 to 50% of the entire rest of season production this week. So it's pretty much play or drop, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for that. Up to the injury report. Ruvain, we've been off for a couple of weeks here, so it's going to be some injured players.
And unfortunately, a lot of them happen to be out for the season. I wanted to mention Felix Bautista. They said he's got a UCL injury, and I mentioned before that they said right arm discomfort. They weren't sure exactly what it was. They haven't even given a timeline yet. And today we're taping this. It's August 31st. A pitcher with an injured elbow, no timeline, 1 month left of the season, no time to ramp back up. What are you going to get out of him? Are they going to really put him in a high pressure situation and risk further injury for their young closer? I don't think that's the case. So I think he's a pretty good situation where you can drop him and not have to worry about who's going to pick up on that next week. You think someone's going to pick up Felix Bautista next week? I don't think so. Another guy, if you've been holding on to and hoping they'd come back, Nick Lodolo, he's done for the year. He actually re-injured and he had another stress reaction in his left tibia. He's done for the year. He can be dropped. Adrian Hauser, I know a lot of people are looking about possibly streaming some Brewers pitchers because they're actually doing pretty decently. Adrian Hauser has an elbow injury. Craig Counsell actually said the hope is that Hauser will miss only a couple of starts and then be ready to rejoin the rotation. We'll see how that goes. But a guy to look for is Julio Teheran. He's on the IL right now. He's supposed to come off, and he may come off to take Adrian Hauser's spot. So if you're looking for a streamer on Milwaukee with a good chance to get possible wins, he's the guy to look for. Tony Gonsolin. He's scheduled for Tommy John surgery this week. He's done for this year, probably done for next year. And I do want to try to end on a little positive news. So I'm going to mention JD Martinez. They said the Dodgers said he's going to have only a 2-game rehab assignment, and then hopefully he should be able to be activated. But the soonest he can be activated is on or around September 8th. So that's something to watch for. He's a guy. If you still need power, it's going to be a question. Let's see how he does when he comes back. But I think he's an older veteran. I think he knows what he's doing. And I also have to mention that on Fangraphs, Jay Jaffe actually wrote a great article discussing Tommy John surgery and all the injuries to the UCL and everything like that. If you're on the website, if you're on Fangraphs, which I hope you are, you'll find that article. Take a look at it. You'll see that Tommy John surgeries have been down over the last couple of years. UCL injuries have been down the last couple of years. So we're hearing them now, but we really didn't hear too much of it during the course of the season, which is a good thing.
Oh, great stuff. Always check out Jay and check out Fangraphs, of course. And check out the Baseball HQ Radio podcast. I want to thank Patrick Davitt for coming on the show. You have such a fantastic podcast that's been around for quite a while, and we're so honored and privileged to have you once again on our show. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. It's so much fun to be on the other side of the mic, as it were, and still have such tremendous baseball conversation and so much intelligence and analysis. It's just great. This is a terrific podcast, and I'm always really just tickled pink to be on the show.
Well, definitely mutual over there. I was just on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Check that episode out. It's a good one, of course. And check out the show. Anything else going on, Patrick, other than the podcast for you?
No, not really. Just curious if you're planning on attending First Pitch Arizona.
I will be there.
That's the plan.
Well, I'll be there too, so I'll see you there. Ruvain, are you going?
That's the plan. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Details
Fantastic.
are trickling in. Baseball HQ does a fantastic job. It's going to be the first weekend in November. Starts on. I'm getting it on the Wednesday. It's starting from Thursday through Sunday. There is a home run derby Saturday night at right across the street at Sloan Park. There's going to be the Fall Stars Classic late afternoon on the Sunday. Tons of games to go to. Tons of panels. Tons of live podcasts. We'll all be there. I'll be doing panels. We'll be doing panels. It's so much fun. You meet so many people. It's ginormous. It's just a great weekend and long extended week. Definitely, if you have not tried it yet, definitely try it this year. It just gets better and better every single year. You see old guys, young guys, and everyone in between. I mean, and gals, young guys and gals, So there you go. All right. Well, that's Patrick. Ruvain, what about you? What's going on with you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come. You can also still read my weekly article on Rotoballer discussing all the injuries I discussed today, as well as many others, and the next man up for each player.
All right. And my name is Ariel Cohen. You can see my stuff over at Fangraphs Rotograph section. You can see the ATC rest of season projections. Going to be through the end of the season. Also at Rotoballer and at ATCNY on, is it X, Twitter? I don't even know what to say. Everybody else is confused with me, so we'll just go with Twitter and X. And, of course, right here on the Beat the Shift podcast, we'll do a couple more episodes before the end of the season. And then we'll probably take a little break until Arizona. So that's the story here. Once again, thank you so much to Patrick Davitt for coming on the show. It was a great episode. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, hope you're chugging and making a great push in the final weeks of the season. Hopefully this podcast helped give you good ideas, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.